Talking about Calvin Ridley today, the talented Mr. Ridley. We'll do it here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. We thank you for joining us here today because it's your team every day. We thank you for making us your first listen. Make sure you tap into our YouTube page, Locked On Jaguars, where you can subscribe for free, hit the like button and that bell for notifications, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Now, look, you need to make sure that you check in every day wherever you get your audio podcast to make sure you do not miss an episode. Another shout out to the everydayers. What's happening? Good to see you back again. And to new listeners, what's going on? Been covering the team for about 14 years, dropping the content that I think you guys want to hear. I kind of shoot from the hip sometimes, but it's organic and it's structured. So if you like it, make sure that you hit that subscription on YouTube and then come back tomorrow and you won't be new anymore. You'll be an everydayer too. We're going to talk about Calvin Ridley, the talented Mr. Ridley. I know the movie was called The Talented Mr. What was it? It wasn't Ridley. It was Ripley, the talented Mr. Ripley. But we have our own talented person here now in Jacksonville. So what we're going to do is go over today his impact on the game plans from our perspective, as well as the defensive coordinator's perspective, where I think he's going to be an absolute nightmare to prepare for and against. And I know you guys are saying, you're making him sound like he's Calvin Johnson. No, I'm making it sound like he's Calvin Ridley, and I'll explain why I think he is the most talented wide receiver that head coach Doug Peterson has ever had. Not assistant coach, yeah, because we know, I think he had T.O., and I think he was around Cheetah. Head coach Doug Peterson, with all due respect to Alshon Jeffrey, I think this kid is the best wide receiver Doug has ever had at his disposal. So I'll discuss that. In segment 2, how the other running backs and wide receivers and tight ends and skill position players will benefit from him, even though they're going to get less targets than they had last year. This is when you add a player that automatically, the second he walks into that stadium or in that locker room, outside of Trevor Lawrence, he's the best skill position player on this football team. So everyone else, you would think, might have to check their ego. No, not really, because they're not built that way. And the other thing is, they kind of, when the alpha walks in the room, everybody accepts it. So we're also going to talk about how this edition in segment 3, how this edition was so seamless and how it went so perfectly, and how his arrival here probably made you really, really look at yourself in the mirror sometimes and say, that's not the guy that I heard everybody responding to, and that's not a guy that you would think would be suspended for anything. Well, this is what happens when a guy comes in and he does and says all the right things, and it feels genuine. So we'll discuss that, how seamless that was too, since there's always so much talk about the culture in the locker room. But let's get back to his impact on the game plan offensively for us, as well as what it means the night before the games or the days leading up to the game for the opposing defensive coordinator, and how them having a little bit of a headache is going to help this team. He is a route tree wide receiver. He does absolutely everything. He runs, he cuts. He's a good route runner. He's a fantasy football dream, okay? The other thing that I wanted to point out that I end up, coming back to, we'll come back to why I believe those things, is in college, played in the biggest big time school you can imagine, understands pressure, thrived in that pressure as a young receiver, played under another great player in Andre Cooper, I believe, then went to the NFL, played under another Alabama alumni in Atlanta, Julio Jones. Julio Jones is a first ballot Hall of Famer with a bullet, but still was able to not take be second fiddle to anybody. Was still out there running routes, was still out there getting it, was still out there putting up big numbers. And then when Julio obviously started to fade a little bit and was injured, Calvin had his best year while his foot was hurt. A couple of years back, we had over 1,300 yards receiving and was one of the, in my opinion, at that point, one of 5 or 6 best wide receivers in the league. That lesson that he learned by playing under those guys, but without shrinking, is a lesson that Christian Kirk, if he already didn't know how to do that because he played with DeAndre Hopkins, can definitely do it now. He played under DeAndre Hopkins and he played under Larry Fitzgerald before. But now coming to a situation where you were the alpha in the room and now you have to go back and do that role again, I think it's going to be something that's very, very easy to do because of the character, the football character of both guys, because of the locker room that Doug Peterson has right now, but more importantly, because both guys understand and know exactly what that's like. So Calvin may have some sensibilities to know that I'm coming in. I know I have to approach it. I know I have to do this the right way, because I would doubt very seriously that he's not the guy that is leading the team next year in targets. Therefore, I just think there's a learned maturity level that comes along with guys playing with other talented players and playing with other players who the team had previously depended on. So I really do think that when you listen back and you hear the stories of Jimmy Smith and Keenan McCardell, the greatest duo to ever play in Jacksonville, and two of the top 6 or 7 players to ever play here. Jimmy would catch a touchdown and Keenan would still go over and say, "Hey, Mark, I was open." In fact, if somebody sees Keenan McCardell right now, I don't care if it's at the gas station or at the mall, just ask him, "Are you open?" He'll say, "Yeah, I'm open right now." Because Keenan is always open. But their relationship, Jimmy was alpha on the field, but Keenan wasn't a bravo. He was an alpha also. But then in their relationship throughout the years, because of the guy that Keenan is, Keenan was almost like a leader off the field. He was the dude that people used to go to for financial advice. He was very learned. And now you see the type of player he is, or player he was, because now he's coaching in the league and is one of the best offensive coaches in the league as a wide receivers coach and a coordinator. So, and a pass game coordinator. So the thing is whoever the guy is on the field, they can have that special relationship, and you never really know who is like the leader off the field in terms of advice and being big brother and those things. All we look at is stats and production. But I do believe it's perfect match. I was wondering for a while what it was going to be like. And then Calvin Ridley got here and he spoke. And he immediately went to work. And everyone embraced him and he embraced them. He did all the right things, said all the right things at the podium, at press conferences. And guess what, y'all? It doesn't even feel contrived. It doesn't feel like a guy who is going out of his way to show contrition for a misstep where he got caught betting on the game and he had to, ironically, I heard it was a Jaguar game, by the way, that he was betting the Jaguars to lose to Atlanta. But that may or may not be true. But even if it is, you may have a perception of a guy that just because he was on the commissioner's suspended list and this, that, and the third, and then you wonder what kind of person he is. Well, when you come into it and you're empty and you say, I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt, I'm going to give this guy a chance, and not be those people that just want their pound of flesh from everybody who, some people get in trouble and folks expect them to drag their tongue on glass for a whole mile and be like seriously Lannister, shame, and walk and have stuff thrown on them. Well, no, when you come into it with an open mind and you sit and listen to Calvin Ridley speak, you immediately know, the one, that was just a misstep. 2, he ain't going to do it again more than likely. And then 3, he's not going to ruffle feathers, man. He's going to come in here and play. He's going to come in here and play. And there's a fine line between shrinking and just admitting you're not number one and just voluntarily just being number 2. Think about basketball, and I use these analogies a lot. You can't be the second best player on the team and just sit around and watch the star, right? You have to be always pressing and contributing, because then when it comes to you, you don't turn that on and off. You want guys that are always on go. And I think that's what he's going to be for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Most weeks he'll lead them in receptions. Some days he won't. And you'll look up and it's Christian Kirk. It might be Evan Ingram. Hell, it might be one of the running backs. You never know who it could be. Last year, Zay Jones had some games where he was the best player on the field that day. What we're going to talk about is how his presence benefits the other guys, and the other guys that are going to get less looks, less touches, and likely less credit and stats. And we're going to do all of that here on the second segment of Locked On Jaguars in just 1 second, after I let you know about today's sponsor, and that is Built. That's right. That's where Built Bars and Built Puffs are, man. And you got to be there too, wherever they are. I'm going to tell you where you can get them in just a second. But first, you got to understand, man, if you're looking for a delicious snack, but you don't want all those sugar and calories, and I can't do it for various reasons, then you need the best tasting protein bar ever, and that's Built. And you got to try this. They come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, cookies, and cream. I'm not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. And what's even better is that they are healthy. Only 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar with a whopping 17 grams of protein. You can get them now locally at your local Walmart. Go back by the pharmacy section and ask for a 4-bar box, or you can go to Sam's Club and you can get a 13-bar box. That's right. Still, if you want to go on Built and see all of the products and order whatever you want and see anything new, make sure you tap into Built.com. Also, wherever you get them, it doesn't matter to me as long as you get them and it's Built Bar. All right, rolling along here on Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day, and we thank you for making us your first listen. Shout out again to the everydayers and new listeners. We're talking about Calvin Ridley, the wide receiver who was obtained in a trade at the trade deadline last year, where the Jaguars made a move to get Calvin Ridley that I thought was absolutely brilliant, and I give them credit for thinking out of the box when no one was even seeing Calvin Ridley on the radar. In fact, I was sitting there, I was like banging on the table for for Chase Claypool. Boy, have you ever thought about something that you wanted and then you saw it and then you go, I'm glad I ain't get it. You ever thought about going to buy a car and you want a car so bad and things don't work out? And 2-3 months later, you heard there's a massive recall on those cars because they ain't no good. And you go, whew, I dodged that bullet. Well, boy, did we dodge a bullet. We dodged a bullet. Remember, that's a bullet that I was glad to take on because I just wanted to give Trevor another weapon so they could have some targets in the red zone, and was going to address another thing that someone brought up that I'm going to bring it up right now, and that is Trevor Lawrence having some overthrow issues early in the game. That's called having a live arm, man. That's what it's called, not having jitters, but wanting to do well so much that you come out and you got that thing gunning, man, and you just need to calm it down a little bit. But he can help here. He can help with this because what he's going to do is he's going to actually, I believe, create more space and more spacing and more openness. So what's going to occur is he's going to have a better look at some people, and guys are going to be running a little bit more free than they always have because you really, really have to account for them. That's what happens when you get more talent. Teams are also going to have to make sure that the guys that have dual responsibilities on defense are not peeking into that backfield. They're not peeking into that backfield. They're not looking around. So this is how it's going to make defensive coordinators sit up at night because, one, they have to devise a plan to stop him and stop the Jaguars, which wasn't easy for a lot of teams to do last year because Doug Peterson was scheming the hell out of everything, getting the ball out of Trevor's hands quickly. Just when you get used to him doing that and guys were running after the catch, getting first downs, and your defense is getting tired, now Trevor takes that 5-step drop and he guns the ball down the field. So it was really an issue, I think, for teams when Doug was getting the ball out fast, throwing the ball horizontally early, and then once he got that going, then he started going down the field and catching seams and catching crossing routes And then the running game got going and the screen game got going. Now, when you add tight end, another tight end who can catch, who can block and catch, he's dual threat, so it's not a tell that he's in the game. And you add this really, really good receiver outside, man, I think what it does, man, it just creates a situation where even though other guys aren't going to get as many touches, they're going to be more effective and make more big plays, which makes the offense that much more unstoppable. Christian Kirk is going to benefit because now he could just play ball. He doesn't have to do all that heavy lifting with a whole bunch of pressure on his back. Right? But he can whenever whenever you need him to, the way Zay Jones was able to do last year. Some games where Kirk didn't have a big game and Zay popped up and had big games, right? The way Keenan McCardell did, if y'all are old enough to remember, the way, I ain't trying to call Keenan and them old, but I'm calling myself old too. But how when Jimmy was getting off and then all of a sudden you forget about 87 and he would get off. That's the beauty of this. I think Evan Ingram going to benefit from it too, because especially around the red zone and some of those other places, it's just going to get to the point that I think defensive coordinators are going to have to pick their poison. And then when they do that, it's still not going to help them because you still have this thing called a very talented quarterback. And then you have Doug Peterson, who's a wizard, and he's just waiting for you. Doug is like he's like a good counterpuncher in boxing. He wants you to swing. Don't just sit there and let me come after you. No, you come. I'm better when you swing and you miss, and I give you 3 on the way back out. That's the way it is with him. So once teams study, come out with their plan, start committing super heavy towards the things that the Jaguars are doing, Doug has shown you he'll switch that thing up at halftime. And he has the confidence. Those players have so much confidence in Doug Peterson. Here's what usually happens. They don't panic. That's why they came back so much. And then when he told us at the press conferences on Monday what the message was, and even after the game, he said he was always calm. And the players say he was always calm, said, look, this is what you got to do. You got to score every time you get the ball. We can't make no more mistakes. Or, man, y'all just relax. You're okay. And to have someone like that with these offensive weapons, I think it's going to benefit a whole bunch of other people. The addition of Tank Bigsby is going to benefit Travis Etienne. I think Travis is going to have a big year, a really big year, but maybe with less touches. It's absolutely possible that there will be a wear down effect on everyone because you created more at the top. I don't get in trouble when I talk about stuff like this. I do get in arguments with people like I did yesterday when I talk about adding more talent at another position. It's somehow people don't look at skill position. Like the skill guys they're okay last year, right? They're pretty good. Oh, we get to add Calvin Ridley. Folks don't see a wide receiver the same way as they do, say, an offensive lineman or another edge rusher. But they should. They really, really should. You should cheer the Jaguars wanting to upgrade their offensive line just as much you should cheer the Jaguars wanting to add another receiver to a group that's already pretty good. I'm going to tell you why I believe this was so seamless and how important that is and was and who that's a credit to and what is it a reflection of. I'll tell you in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, running it down here in the third and final segment on a beautiful Friday here in Northeast Florida. Listen to Locked On Jaguars. I'm the host, Tony Wiggins. Thank you for joining us, making us your first listen, and making yourself an everydayer. Make sure you like and subscribe on the YouTube page at Locked On Jaguars. And please, wherever you get your podcast, make sure you check in every single day to ensure that you don't miss an episode because we are daily. It's your team every day. We say that for a reason. All right. Why was the addition so seamless? And why was it a really, really good fit right away? I wrote that down here because it was something that doesn't happen all the time and everywhere. Sometimes when you make additions, guys are threatened. You make additions and guys are wondering, well, where's my piece of the pie? Or Zay Jones, if they added a new receiver, that means that he wasn't starting in 2 wide receiver sets. It's going to be 9 times out of 10, it's going to be Ridley. So everybody kind of moves down a little bit. Now, some people might say, well, Zay Jones was always a third or fourth receiver. So what's the problem? Well, he wasn't a third or fourth receiver here when they came back from 27 points down and won a playoff game. He had the best season of his career last year here. But now coming off of that season, you would really, really think, damn, as soon as I have the best year of my life and prove that I'm at least the number 2, they go out and get a guy who's better than everybody. So now I'm number 3. But you know why that didn't happen? It didn't happen for 2 reasons. One, the trade was made in the middle of last year, so they already knew he was coming. And at the time the trade was made, the Jaguars were under 500, right? 2, just maybe the thought that everyone knew he was coming. Maybe they went on a run late in the year because everybody was like, I better tighten up. So that means iron sharpens iron, right? 3, with the kind of people that they have brought into this organization. So I have no problem with them drafting for traits. I have no problem with them loving the guys that they have and wanting to be development. I got a problem just when you tie one hand behind your back automatically and just say, we're going to stick to this formula no matter what happens. I don't like stuff like that, but I will give them credit. They're not drafting or signing knuckleheads. They're not drafting or signing people that don't have football character, a high degree of football character. They're not drafting or signing guys that don't absolutely love to work. They're not drafting and signing guys that they have to motivate. They're drafting, I said this 20-something years ago, they're drafting football playing Jessies. They're drafting guys that love the grind, they love the process, they love the hustle, and that resonates with a lot of people. So what happens is Calvin Ridley comes in here, and I mentioned in segment 1 how he said and did all the right things. Well, he comes in here and he says and does all the right things, and guess what that leads to? That leads to the guys who may or may not have known him previously to say, he's one of us. I don't know how Doug and Trent vetted him at the trade deadline because he belonged to someone else and he was suspended. He couldn't talk to anybody, right? Do you think that they went around the league and asked people what kind of kid he was? When he came out in the draft, this is why eval is so important. Even if Trent Baalke or Doug Peterson were on teams that didn't need wide receivers, this is why eval is so important. This is why remembering your scouts or knowing someone who played or coached with the kid, even if you have to go back in college and say, what kind of dude is he? This is why those truths that come out in that process is so important. And the only way you can really, this is why I say eval is eval. So why would the Jaguars go to a workout or interview a kid that they're not going to pick in the draft? You know why you do it? Because 4 years down the line, you might run into him and you might have to make a determination of what type of player he is and who he is. You might have to do that without having the benefit of a conversation with him and being able to properly vet him. This is why all of those things in the offseason are so important. And sometimes people think that it's stupid for them to be at a workout or interviewing a dude at positions where they don't need him. If eval is important when eval is important. So I'll be interested to see how much they knew about Calvin Ridley and how much they knew to make them comfortable enough to know that he was not a guy that was going to wreck this offense. You know, this line, the talent here, the locker room. And maybe it goes back to something I said at that time at the trade deadline. I want to think the Jaguars, I don't know what week it was, but I'm thinking they probably were 2-8 or 2-7 or 2-6. So if that's the case, they're probably not as much concerned about the locker room and the culture. They were concerned about winning. So they know he was a talented player, right? And then everything turns around, maybe not because they signed him or they traded the rights for him. Everything could be motivation. But once everything got turned around and got going, and I think he saw what was happening and observed it and saw the run that the Jaguars made down the stretch and saw that in the second half of the season that Trevor Lawrence was not just a guy who had all of these high praise as a generational talent and all of the thing. No, he tangibly saw it, because NFL players don't care about hype. Once you get in the NFL, nobody cares about that. And last year in the second half of the season, Trevor Lawrence was a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. Make no doubt about that. The last 8 weeks, he just was. And he had a couple of stinkers in there now. The Titans game wasn't that great. And the first half of the Chargers game wasn't that great in the playoffs. But what you saw in that game was full circle. And Calvin Ridley was asked when he got here, and he interrupted the question. I wasn't at this press conference, but I can't remember who asked him the question. What would make you want to, are you happy to be here or something like that? And what was the reason you wanted to be? And he's just Trevor Lawrence. That's it. Trevor Lawrence. Stuff like that doesn't just win fans over. That stuff wins your teammates over. Because when he said that, I bet you somewhere there were 53 guys going, you damn right. That's why you wanted to come here, because you right. He is 52 players. Trevor, I probably wouldn't say you damn right. But if it was me, I'd have been like, you damn right you came here because of me. Right? But it's seamless. So sometimes when I'm critical, even though when I'm being honest, folks get upset. So I'm gonna say this. I want y'all to write it down and take a picture. All right? Write it down and take a picture. I think when it comes to building the character culture of the locker room and the type of people that you want on your football team, Trent Baalke has done a fabulous job along with Doug Peterson to get the right people in this building. There you go. Credit to him. And the credit to Calvin Ridley also for coming in here. And he almost seems like a leader now and getting right to it. Credit you for joining me on Locked On Jaguars every single day, because it's your team every day. I thank you. I am absolutely gracious for you joining me every single day here to check out this podcast. We'll be back next week with some more stuff. I'm actually going out to practice on Monday. Going out to minicamp on a Monday. So we'll check out and see what's going on. So you'll probably get a later show in the afternoon because I don't like to go out Monday and then tell you Tuesday morning what happened. I want to do it that day. So anytime I anticipate news, sometimes you get the podcast later in the day. But doesn't matter. I'll still be here because it's your team every day. Make me your first listen. Make me your next listen and all of that stuff, man. And we'll see you on Monday on the Locked On Jaguars podcast. Please take care of each other. Enjoy your family. Enjoy the weekend.